Hello everyone, welcome to CSE 320 Data Communication course. Today we are going to talk about chapter 5 of Progression Group, that is analog transmission. In the previous chapter we have learned about digital transmission. Similar to that we will learn about analog transmission in this chapter. So the main idea of this chapter or of this topic is how we can convert our data to an analog signal. And as we already know that data can be both a digital data or analog data. So we can convert both the digital data to an analog signal or an analog data to an analog signal. But in this chapter, we will be mainly focused on the first part, that is converting the digital data to an analog signal. So this is the whole process, that is we have a sender who has some digital data and it wants to send this data to a receiver, and in this way we will use a modulator that will convert this digital data to an analog signal and send it to the receiver, and in the receiver end there will be a demodulator that will receive this analog signal and convert it into a digital data so that the receiver can read the data or receive the data in the right form. Okay, so the question is, how can we do that, or how can a digital data be converted to an analog signal? So that will be the main topic in this chapter. So this is sorry. So this is our topic of discussions. So uh, basically, the process is very simple. We will have a carrier signal of fixed amplitude and frequencies, and as we know, an analog signal basically has three common characteristics. That is, it has a fixed amplitude, it has some kind of frequencies, and it has a signal phase that identifies uniquely an analog signal. So, if we want to convert digital data to an analog signal, we need to change one of those or multiple of those characteristics according to the bits, so that based on the changes of these characteristics, we can uniquely identify that, oh, this portion of the signal is basically representing a 0 bit or 1 bit. Okay, so based on the changes of the characteristics, this digital to analog conversion is basically of three types. If we change the amplitude of the analog signal, then we call this conversion as amplitude shift keying or ASK. If we change the frequency of the analog signal to identify different digital bits, then we call it frequency shift keying or FSK. And finally, if we use the phase of the analog signal to identify different bits, then we call it as phase shift keying or FSK. Okay. And finally, there is another type of digital to analog conversions that basically use both the amplitude characteristics and the phase characteristics of the analog signal, and combining these two characteristics it represents different types of digital bits. Okay, and this type of digital to analog conversion is known as quadrature amplitude modulations or QAM. Okay, so there are basically three types: ASK, FSK, and PSK. And if we combine these two types, then it will create another types that is known as quadrature amplitude modulation or QA. So from now we will basically try to understand or try to learn about the basic ideas of these three types of shift keying and how they represent digital data into an analog signal.